Hello and welcome to May the Review Be With You with Nick and Joe. I'm Joe.
I'm Nick.
And today we are picking up where we left off from Loki Season 2, Episodes 4 and 5. I think we were going to wait till the end of the season to talk about the other half of this, but honestly, things have been off the rails. Crazy. That we need to address this now. And I think we want to talk about perhaps some speculation about the finale before the finale actually happens. But before we get into that, Nick, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling fantastic. Well, I guess, at a loss for words, as you can clearly tell by that long pause.
You were talking like a mile per second before we started, and then suddenly, it's time to talk, and you're like, I got nothing. I'm done.
Well, you asked me how I was feeling. You didn't ask me how I was feeling about the episode, so you threw me off a little bit.
Yeah, I don't care about Loki at all. I just want to know about you.
I'm great. I'm doing really well. I thought I had a headache this morning. I don't any longer.
That's the real victory.
Yeah, so we're talking about episode 4 and 5 today. And really quick, episode 4 was totally insane. From a shock perspective, way more insane than 5, I think, for me. We got our Thanos-esque snapping ending to episode 4, which we'll get to. But maybe the best episode I've seen from a TV show in Marvel. Episode 4. So well done. And then 5 was an incredible follow-up. So I'm really excited to get into the details. What about you?
I think you put it really well there. I'm just going to echo that. I mean, as far as directing, as far as writing and acting goes, wow, episode 4, Heart of the TVA just really knocks it out of the park. And I have a lot of good things to say about episode 5, science fiction, as well. We'll get to those. But yeah, it's exactly like you said. There wasn't a single piece of Marvel television, whether it's, the current Disney Plus stuff or the Netflix stuff or the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. stuff, that ever left me feeling the way that I did when I left a movie theater after watching Infinity War. And as you said, the Thanos snap happens, right? That was incredible. And just a place I didn't think that they were going to go. And I'm really proud of Marvel for taking a risk on that. Super cool. But yeah, let's get into it. So episode 4, Heart of the TVA. This episode starts with right where we left off in episode 3, where Ravonna and Miss Minutes are going over what's been taken from Ravonna, which we learn is her memories of her partnership with Kang, or not Kang, but He Who Remains, and her learning the truth of what her greater role actually as his general was, and the memories that were stripped away from her in that. We transition over to Victor Timely in the TVA, who is very confused about everything, which who could blame him? But he starts accepting things actually rather quickly. Because he starts to recognize a familiarity with the TVA as he's read all about it in the TVA handbook, and comes to meet the author of the TVA handbook, Ouroboros, in a scene that is both very delightful and a little creepy for what it might imply for later, and we'll get into that. Shenanigans ensues as Dox and Brad in prison are having debates on whether or not that they should stage a coup. Meanwhile, Miss Minutes and Ravonna show up to say, hey, everybody, join us, but not before B-15 made a plea with Dox to help the TVA. This touches Dox. She decides she's not going to help Miss Minutes and Ravonna, and we see probably the most gruesome death in all of the MCU. Actually, we don't see it. It's an off-camera violence moment, which actually, I love off-camera violence, for the record. Not because I can't handle violence, but I think off-camera violence leaves more to the imagination. And that was horrible. I want to talk about that scene too, because there's some gross details about it. But we get toward the climax of our episode as everything is falling into disarray. And the time loom is overloading. Victor Timely, after having confrontation with Miss Minutes, decides to step up to the plate, and he's going to insert, I don't know whatever the piece of technology is, but whatever it is that's going to help them secure the time loom. He steps out, and his skin does not melt. His existence is ripped apart. He is spaghettified.
Spaghetti!
And it's horrible. Nobody knows what's going on, least of all Loki, who simply ends the episode by saying, I don't know. And we come to a close. Yeah, episode 4 was absolutely wild. Nick, I think one of my favorite little details about episode 4 is... I might be confusing this. No, I'm not. Episode 4 starts in a really similar way that episode 6 of the first season did, which is, you know, when the MCU logo pops up, that you start to, like, hear the voices of the past in the MCU, right? And then you travel through, like, the time stream, and you see, like, or I don't think you see any events, but, like, you hear all the events of MCU history unfolding. This episode starts to do that, and then quickly rips away, and then we just see a chaotic timeline branched out, instead of, like, the harmony that we saw in episode 6, right?
Right.
We see just chaos.
Chaos, yeah.
Yeah, and the episode closes in a very similar fashion, where it just ends. It just cuts black. Like, it's a very abrupt beginning, very abrupt end. Really cool detail. I like that a lot.
Yeah, that's a great point. Totally, and it's fun to see some of the things online where people put them side by side, and you realize how bad it actually is, because you're just seeing the previous season's, like, perfect timeline, and then you're seeing the current, like, chaos. But yeah, let's get into it, man. Let's rip this apart, so to speak, piece by piece, shall we?
Let's spaghettify it.
So the episode opens, and it's a quick scene, but I think it's really important. This is a flashback, or essentially Miss Minutes is showing Renslayer a flashback of Renslayer and He Who Remains at the end of the previous war for the timeline, basically. And this is when the TVA, we can assume, was created. And Renslayer ended up being, like, the top general for He Who Remains based on this scene. And we find out that, like, she had a lot to do with the TVA as we know it, and was working very closely with He Who Remains. And she goes back to the TVA, and He Who Remains says that he'll join her in a minute, and then he has Miss Minutes wipe everyone's memories in the TVA. And this is why we get some scenes where people from the TVA don't remember things before a certain time, right? Like, OB's met Obius. OB's met Obius. Oh my gosh. OB's met Mobius, but Mobius doesn't remember meeting OB. And I'm assuming that has to maybe do with something where OB's memory didn't get wiped.
Right.
Which is a fascinating thing to think about. But Mobius's memory obviously was part of the wiping, like Renslayer's was after that last war. So that's, like, totally, like, a cool little detail.
That's an interesting detail, like, especially from the partnership that we see kind of blossom in this episode between Timely and OB. And to know that He Who Remains doesn't wipe out the memory of OB, apparently.
Right.
But OB doesn't know who He Who Remains is. That's interesting. Nor does he have any memory of ever meeting Victor Timely before. He's just familiar with Victor Timely's work.
Yeah, it's this might be the thing I'm most excited to uncover. Like, I hope we get some kind of answer to this in the 6th episode, because obviously, like, we don't have it yet. It's such a fascinating circle. So that'll be, like, it's just so interesting. And then, I mean, like I said, that beginning scene's pretty quick, and from there where does it go in episode 4? It goes straight into
Victor. We go straight to the TVA.
Straight into the TVA. Victor Timely arrives. He sees the wall of Kang, and He Who Remains, and sees himself, basically. But really quickly, they're on a mission, right? Loki and Mobius get back. They grab Victor Timely. Like, we have to go to OB to fix the loom. And this is when we get might have been one of my favorite scenes in this episode in total, is we get the Victor Timely OB meeting, which is like so cool. Because who talked first? How did that go? It was
so Ouroboros is talking about what their options are, and someone I think it's Mobius uses the name OB, and that's what causes Timely to like perk his eyebrows.
Yeah.
OB.
Yeah.
Ouroboros, you know?
Yeah. And then he's like,
yeah.
I learned everything I know from OB, from this book or whatever, and then OB's like, I learned everything I know from Victor Timely.
Right, smarter than Edison, smarter than Tesla, held back by the technology of
time. Yeah, it was so awesome. And that when OB says Victor's name, the Loki's face is fantastic. He's just like, what? Like, you know who Victor Timely is? Like, what's going on? And then they both take out their TVA handbooks and they like have a quick little scientist exchange, and that was so cool. Dude, because
you know what that reminded. Go ahead. No, sorry.
I was just like, it's just cool because, you know, then Mobius is like, well, who came first, you know? And yeah.
You know what that scene reminded me of, though? It reminds me of the finale of season 1, where He Who Remains is telling us about like how a variant of him was the first to make multi-universal contact with a variant of that variant, right? And you know, at first everything was fine. They were all just very. I forgot the word he used. He was like, it was very like, it was a narcissistic piece where we were all meeting each other and we're like, I like your shoes, I like your hair.
Right.
You know, like that's what it felt like. You know, it was like, oh, I love your work. I love your work. It's the same work, right?
Right.
Which I can't remember if you and I discussed this in our last episode or if it was off mic. But we were playing around with the idea of whether or not Ouroboros is a variant of Kang.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which
I think we have to talk about it now. Like, you know, like, and that this is one thing that Marvel has set up already, right? That like variants of yourself from another timeline, it doesn't necessarily have to be the exact body and person.
Right. Take Loki, right? For example. We've
Loki's a great example.
Variants.
Right. There's a ton of different styles, right? Even in a damn alligator. Like, so like
the best.
So anything is possible, right? Like you and I discussed maybe Renslayer at one point being a variant of Loki, but now a variant of He Who Remains. But I think that's probably not the case at this point. After seeing that opening scene of episode 4, but I think it's very possible that OB is a variant of He Who Remains because of what you just said, like that conversation at the end of season 1 is very important, and maybe this is one of those interactions, right, with OB and Victor Timely meeting each other, and they're just variants of each other, and that would make sense who started it, like, we don't know. So I think it's very possible, and it's like totally fascinating. It's a headache for sure to think about that whole thing. So
it's a headache that I want. This is the kind of headache that I enjoy having.
Yeah, there's so many things that they haven't answered, and we have one more episode, and I'm just like, there's no way we get all the answers for it. It's just like
no, I
totally
don't think so either. I think that the cards for a season 3 are definitely in play right now.
Yeah.
This very much feels like a Empire Strikes Back sort of story at the current moment, right? Like where there's no real path to victory for the protagonists for now.
Yeah.
Right now they're just trying to survive.
Right. Yeah. It's just pure survival.
Yeah.
So after that interaction, Sylvie breaks it up quickly, basically, and just like, guys, can we save the loom first and sign later, or however she words that?
She is very uncomfortable, as she should be. She is very uncomfortable with this interaction, and it'll happen again later. where
Right.
they do the handshake, and she's like, "Oh, this is all sorts of wrong." This like you can almost hear He Who Remains in the background, like whispering, like, "I'll see you soon."
Yeah.
You know, like he's coming.
So creepy and so good. But the reason I wanted to really quick, there's a scene like right after that, right, where OB and Casey are explaining like what they figured out and what needs to happen, and they bring out a prototype or like a diagram, a small size diagram of the loom, and OB has a line where he goes, "I'm honestly embarrassed that Victor is here to see it." He's like so embarrassed that his like idol is here to see some like crappy diagram that they had to make quickly because they're running out of time. I just thought that was like fantastic.
Actually a great diagram.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That was just like, I love little things like that. It was just hilarious.
Oh,
and
you'll
so
love
I
this,
wanted to mention it.
That's a reference.
Oh, really?
That scene, yeah, that scene's a reference. It's a scene. It's a callback to Back to the Future, where Doc Brown is trying to describe to Marty how they can get time travel to work, and how they're going to use the DeLorean. They're going to hook it up to the clock where they know lightning is going to hit the clock, and like he has it all set up. He's got City Hall. He's got like the park. He's got the car, and he's like, "Oh, if I had more time, I could have made it look good." And Marty's like, "When did you have the time to make this?" It's a really funny scene. It's like almost verbatim the same scene.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's a great call out. Nice.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
As a time travel fan, I appreciated that. You know me, I'm a sucker for time travel. I love it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what's next after that? After they talk about the loom and what needs to be done, there's a quick little fun scene about like who's gonna go and put on the suit and walk outside, and Loki's like, "Wait, why does it have to be me?" And Mobius is like, "Well, I already did it, and it's not me," you know. And like, there's like,
yeah, figure doesn't look like me.
Yeah, and they're kind of setting it up for later, right? How it's going to be important who goes out there, basically, is what they're kind of telling us in that scene, right? It's actually important, who's actually going to be the one to go out there.
The wrong person could go out.
Right. So, but then from there, correct me if I'm wrong, but the next thing is Mobius going to get pie, which is like Joe's dream, because Joe's been so enthralled with the time pie.
What's with the pie? Why do they keep bringing it up?
You know what? You're not the only person who's mad, because Sylvie was very pissed that Mobius is just like, how can you go get pie? Calling him out for getting mad at him for getting pie in a time like this, and also like calling him out for not looking for his life on the timeline, and how could you not want to know, and all these things, and it was just like so funny, because she's basically just, enjoy your pie, and like storms out of there.
I want to make a quick comment on Sylvie.
Yeah, please.
So for the record, Sophia DiMartino is a wonderful actress, and I think every time she is Sylvie, I think she always has a really interesting performance. She can very much focus herself, or be the focus of a scene, right? I think she can command a scene really well. I have notes on I can't remember her name. I will look this up. Shame on me. The actress who plays Ravonna Renslayer. I don't feel the same way about her. Anyway, I bring up Sylvie because I freaking kind of I feel like this is actually kind of one of the low points of this season so far for me is Sylvie, because like I feel like all we give Sylvie to do is to just be mad. like every scene, Sylvie's just so mad. I'm just so mad.
Right.
And like the character should be mad, right? Like there's so much to be mad about, but like it's almost all we've given her to do this season is to just be pissed off and like I just want to be left alone, but like also like I'm sort of interested in what's going on. I don't know. I'm hoping we can see a little bit more of her, because like I mean, when I say here, I love her performance. I want her to be able to expand more on it. Hopefully in episode 6. But yeah, like you said, Sylvie's just pissed.
Right, yeah. So we had that quick thing where Sylvie's getting mad at Mobius because he wants to go get pie or whatever, and she storms off. And then the very next scene is Brad and Docs in their holding cell with the rest of the team that was trying to destroy the branches, and did a pretty good job at the end of episode 3. And they're having a conversation about what to do, right? Like Brad's like very on edge. He wants to, get out of there. And Doc's just kind of feels very like at ease, and she's just sitting there like waiting or whatever. And eventually B-15 walks in, and B-15's purpose is to try to convince Docs to join them in this new TVA, so that Docs and her team can join B-15 with how the TVA is progressing from here forward. And she gives her this nice speech, and they have a good conversation. And then B-15 just was like, think about it, I'll come back, right? And so B-15 leaves Docs and Brad and the rest of the people in there to discuss what they're going to do, if they're going to join the new TVA or revolt, basically. And at this point in the show, I think we're switching back and forth a couple times because we don't get the next scene in that holding cell yet. We go back to Loki and Sylvie, I believe. And this is the scene where like I don't know where Mobius went, but Sylvie, like Loki is still in the room with the pie room, right? And Sylvie, I think the scene opens with Sylvie walking in, and is just like, "Oh, I took a wrong turn. Didn't plan on coming to Pie Land." That's what she said. And this scene is really cool because we get like a real heart to heart between Loki and Sylvie, and Loki's trying to convince Sylvie that like fixing the problem is important, and it's like a brilliant like speech basically to try to like make Sylvie understand that like she needs to be part of helping to fix the problem, not just running away from it, basically. And we get this really cool line where Sylvie is like essentially saying like we're playing God, like we shouldn't no one's allowed to play God, like it's not possible. And then basically Loki looks at her and just says, "We are gods," and walks off. Which is like an awesome scene because when it happened, like after Sylvie said like her last line, I was like, yeah, well, Loki is a god. And then I was like, wait, she's a Loki too. I was like, they are gods. Like it's like I was saying at the same time. I thought that was a really cool little piece of information.
I actually really enjoyed that line too. The line itself is just a really cool line, right? But I think what I enjoyed more about it is two things: the line delivery and the direction on the camera action. Because the line delivery, like that could be like a really proud moment for someone, or like a very like glorious purpose like moment for someone, right? Like we are gods, right? Like, and it's not delivered that way.
Right.
It's delivered in like a tired and frustrated manner, right? It's like, we are gods, like like he like feels like that weight, right?
Yeah.
And I love that like the camera is not like zoomed in on either Loki, right? It's like it's far away, and like you don't see Tom Hiddleston's face really. You see his body language,
right?
And I thought that was such a great idea, considering like how he delivers the line, right? It's not a glorious purpose; it's a I have to do this, because it is what we're born to do. Like, I don't want to do this; we have to do this.
Right.
And then he walks out of the room, right? Like, awesome directed scene. Yeah, super cool. Speaking of direction, wanted to bring this up. So we've talked previously, and I want to make sure I get this right. Yeah, okay, cool. So we've talked previously about the direction on this show, specifically episode 1, where episode 1 had such a paranoia, horror-esque feel to it. And one of the things that, or what was responsible for capturing that was the direction, the directors, Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, who we've said, was responsible for the Moon Knight show, where that feeling of paranoia and like you don't know what the heck is going on, you feel like you're being chased all the time. Like they're responsible for that show and capturing that feeling. They returned here in episode 4, Heart of the TVA. Awesome. And I think you can just tell that there's this looming sense of doom and dread throughout this entire episode. And these guys just know how to capture that. I'm looking at the credits right now. So Benson and Moorhead, they did episode 1. They weren't around for 2 or 3. They're back for 4, and they're here for the rest of the season. We see them again in 5, and they're here for the finale.
Nice.
I think that this is a combo, like a name combo, we're going to start to see in Marvel a lot more. Especially with 4 ending the way it was and like having the critical reception that it got.
Yeah.
This sort of reminds me of like when the Russos took over the Captain America series with Winter Soldier and like the reception that got.
Yeah.
And then of course like Marvel started relying more and more on the Russos right into like their ultimate project of Endgame, right? I don't know if that's where their career goes. I'm pretty sure we already know the directors for the upcoming Avengers movies. One of them being the Shang-Chi director, if I recall correctly, which is really interesting. But I think Marvel really likes these guys' works. These are names to remember. We're going to continue to see them, I feel like.
Yeah. I think that's a great call out. Like, they've been phenomenal. It's been so good. So I'm excited to Feige usually makes the right decision with stuff like that, especially when the reception's really good. So it'll be interesting to see what their next project is and how this season ends, right? Sorry, hold on a second. I think I might have to sneeze.
Don't you tease me with no false sneeze here.
We're good.
Is that a false sneeze?
It was a false sneeze. I apologize.
You son of a bitch. Unbelievable.
All right, so let's go.
You promised me a sneeze, and now I'm here sneezeless.
Oh my god. Calm down.
We gotta talk about the time cube, and we gotta talk about Dox and Brad. Cool.
Yeah, that's next anyway. That's because like we were skipping in this middle part of the episode. We're kind of skipping back and forth between like a couple people before we like kind of get into what's gonna ensue next. But yeah, the next part now is Renslayer, Miss Minute show up in this holding cell with Dox and Brad and the rest of the betrayers, and this is Renslayer basically trying to convince Dox and her team to join Renslayer to take back control of the TVA and make it run like it did before. At this point, Dox has decided that her and her team are standing with the B-15 and the new TVA, and they won't work for Renslayer. Brad is having an existential crisis because Brad doesn't want to die. Brad is a very selfish person. He had a life on the timeline. He was loving it. He wants to go back. He doesn't want. He doesn't care how. He's going to do whatever it takes.
Blame Brad though. Like he was a movie star. Like I wouldn't want to leave that either. Exactly.
He is a movie star. He's got no morals, and so Brad is the only person who decides to go with Renslayer, basically. And the next thing that happens is I wrote down gruesome, my goodness, Disney in my notes. I can't believe they did this on a Disney TV show.
This actually might be the most shocking thing that happened in the entire episode.
This is so disgusting. And it's amazing, like, and it's a testament to the directors, as you were just saying, because they didn't show us anything, but they used every other possible detail with sound to get us to feel as disgusting as possible.
Oh, I'm so glad to bring this up, yeah.
It's unbelievable what they did. It was so well done. And basically, so, Renslayer uses this, what is this machine called? Do we have a name for it?
The machine has a name, but the setting that they use is a time cube.
Time cube, right. And this is basically puts everyone in this time cube, and it's essentially, the time cube is just shrinking slowly, right? And it gives me flashbacks to A New Hope, when Han Solo and Leia and Luke are stuck in the garbage compactor, and it's just the walls are closing in, right? So this is what's happening to Dox and the rest of her team, and they all know they're about to die. They're very weirdly quiet about it, They're all just like, yeah, this is just our fate. And all we get is shots of Renslayer's face, Miss Minutes' reaction, and Brad's reaction as this is closing, and as you can hear the bodies crunching together, and then you hear like the blood dripping through the floor, which is so
the most disgusting.
I'm still in shock. I watched this episode 3 times. I'm still in shock that they did that. Like, unbelievable. And Mrs. Minutes' face was like hilarious.
Hey, hold on. Miss Minutes.
Miss
Lady
Minutes,
is single.
sorry.
She doesn't want to be, but she's single.
My bad. Miss Minutes' face was like, she's crazy. Like, she is the scariest AI that I think could possibly exist. Because she was like loving it. It was joy. It was joy. It was pure joy.
Do we have another like villain in the MCU who like is that sadistic?
No,
like, I don't think so.
Not
right?
Not openly.
Like,
not openly.
The only person like I can compare that to, weirdly, is actually this Loki. Remember like that moment where he's like ripping the eye out of somebody in the Avengers movie?
Yeah.
And he's like,
right.
He's like smiling about it.
Right.
Yeah, I can't think of another villain who like took that much pleasure out of watching suffering.
Yeah, totally insane. And Brad is like totally freaked out and disgusted, but he's glad he's not there, right? He's glad he did.
My man Brad is a survivor.
From a survival perspective, he made the right choice, right? Of course. So, yeah.
Hang on, real quick. This just occurred to me. Are you getting Executioner vibes from him? The Executioner from Thor Ragnarok?
Oh my gosh.
Like, now that we're talking about it, I'm kind of getting Executioner vibes from him.
Yeah, it's like the same, right? Like,
yeah.
Morally, like, doesn't feel great about it, but prefers to live. And just going with the devil at the moment, who's going to keep him alive, right? Like, and
it's actually incredibly similar now that about it.
It is very similar. That's a great point. It's very similar. I wonder now it's making me think like, what's his character? Does he have like an actual character arc at the end? Is he going to have like a redemption? It's possible.
Mm-hmm.
Although I don't like him as much as I did the Executioner, so I hope he doesn't.
Yeah, same.
Like, he doesn't deserve one. Like, he doesn't deserve one. Like,
the Executioner was funny, right? Like,
right, exactly.
He was funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brad sucks. Especially he made Mobius mad, and like that makes me mad. Don't make Mobius mad.
Yeah, leave Mobius
is a good boy. Yeah.
Okay, so we have this gruesome scene, and the next thing that happens is this whole. This is when the episode really kind of like picks up. So the next thing we cut to is Victor and I think it's Mobius and OB and Casey, and they're building this thing for fixing the loom. And Mobius walks in with a hot chocolate. Mobius walks in with a hot chocolate from the cocoa machine, and Victor is completely enthralled. He is just like, "What are you drinking? Where did you get it? What do you mean there's a hot cocoa machine? I have to see this," basically, right? Like, he's like so shocked. And one of the guards, whose name I don't have written down, and sadly doesn't really matter because he doesn't last very long. He's like, "I can take him." Like, I guess he's just bored sitting in that room, and he's just like, I'm okay if I can walk 100 yards down the road and get out of this area. So Mobius is like, "Oh, okay, sure." So this guard takes Victor to this hot cocoa machine, and we get this weird scene where like Victor like makes a hot cocoa and then he's giving it to the guard like a sign, like I think he's giving it as like a sign of friendship, but also like, you drink it first so I know that this isn't gonna kill me. It's like such a weird scene.
It felt so creepy.
Yeah, it was creepy, but then it was sweet because the guard was like, oh my god, this is delicious.
He liked it. Yeah,
thank you so much.
Like, oh.
And then he gets pruned. And it's Brad, because Renslayer and Brad have escaped the holding cell, of course, and now Brad is now a murderer. Like,
what a wonderful way to be taken out of existence, though. You know, like your final like thought is, hey, delightful,
delightful hot cocoa. But of course, we know that he's not out of existence. He just goes to the end of time, where I imagine there's no hot cocoa. So it's a little bit brutal.
Oh, he goes to the void. To be clear, two different places.
The void, yes, he goes to the void. Anyway, so then we get this, you know, obviously now we have a problem because Victor has now been kidnapped by Brad and is now in Renslayer's hands. I'm looking at my notes to make sure that I'm in the right order here on this stuff. But yeah, so now Brad and Renslayer and Victor Timely are in the same room, and Renslayer and Miss Minutes want to know everything that Victor does and knows, and Victor is beginning to take them on a brilliant story to basically kill time and stall. The next thing we get is this scene of everyone gathering around the hot cocoa machine, where, you know, Mobius and Loki and Sylvie are realizing that Victor is missing, and it must be Renslayer because B-15 walks in and says that Dox's team is all dead. And so they realize that, okay, Renslayer and Miss Minutes are here for Victor, and Loki is like, they're not just here for Victor, they're here for the TVA. So we know that they're here still. They haven't left because their mission is to get the TVA back. And a very quick little thing about this scene, the prune stick, does that have a name?
It does, and it's escaping me right now.
Okay, well, we're gonna call.
I want to call it a time stick. It's definitely not.
It's not. We'll call it a prune. We'll call it a pruning device. Let's call it a pruning device.
Yeah.
That sounds better. The pruning device. Yeah. Brad left it on the floor when he. So like, for whatever reason, but I can only imagine because he looked like he had a look of disgust within himself after he did that prune. So I think that maybe he left it because he was a little bit upset with himself for doing that. Is if I have to give a reason. I don't know if there is one, except that we needed Loki to pick it up for what happens next. So Loki picks it up.
Yeah.
Loki picks it up. It's very important that he picks that up. And also, so the second he picked this up, I was like, oh my God. I was like, I think Joe's right. Like, it was that moment I was like, I think Joe's correct. And then the next thing that happens is Loki and Sylvie get in the elevator. And the elevator like freaks out, and then Loki gets out of it real quick, and then the doors close on each other, and it's just Sylvie stuck in the elevator. And when that happened, I was like, "Oh my God, Joe's correct. We are now in the moment of episode 1 from this season, where Loki is jumping back and forth between time." I think you might want to take it away from here, since it was your call out.
I wish I could say I was the only one. From what I saw online, this was a popular theory, but like it just felt right? Like that the person who was responsible for saving Loki was Loki,
right?
Yeah, and we get to that moment. I was also very excited as soon as I saw him pick up the pruning stick. It was like, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
we're here.
Yeah,
I'm super interested though, like what this is ultimately going to mean, because like we do get some like. There's no immediate answer as to when this is happening, like the significance of this necessarily. Like, yes, he's saving him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like that's significant for episode 1, right?
Right.
But we're in episode 4, and this scene of like Loki like understanding, like, oh, I'm supposed to be here right now, so I can save me for all of time, basically, right?
Right.
And like there's this weird like clarity that like comes over him, and like I'm pretty sure like we're all on the same page there with like what he's realizing.
Mm-hmm.
But it does feel like there's something more to that scene that we don't quite understand yet. And like he even says to like Sylvie, like, I promise you this will all make sense.
Right.
Which like obviously that's like a quick little joke to him and her, but I almost feel like that's a line from the writers to the audience, like, I promise this will make sense
right
soon.
Yeah, that's a great call. And the other thing to mention in the scene too is we finally get an answer for who the hell is calling. This random ass phone in the TVA. Like, it's been bothering me since episode 1. I was like, oh my god, please answer the phone. Like, and you know what? It's like there's a lot going on, and he has taken his time to pick this phone up. Like, it's just gonna ring forever. You know? Like,
oh my
I'm
god.
like, you know, phones typically have an answering machine, and even if they don't, dude, like, you have bigger things going on right now. Why are you taking your time to answer this phone like it's going to be a problem on the other line? Like, it's a phone call. Like, he's approaching it like it could be a bomb that is going to explode if he answers. Like dude, pick up the damn phone.
Something...
What's the reason for the suspense?
Right? Like, yeah, what? So, man, I bet you anything. Okay, sorry. I have to go back to complete this whole thought. Okay. So I just realized, like, why, like, Benson and Moorhead are directing this episode, because it's all tied together with episode 1, and episode 1 and 4 are basically, like, the same episode.
Yeah.
Right? They have to direct both, because, like, they set that up, so they have to come back to it.
Yeah,
right?
That's a great call. Yeah.
So, which, that might be the reason why they're doing 5 and 6, too.
Which, that's brilliant writing.
6...
That's brilliant writing to begin with, because, like, they knew that they could get different directors for 2 and 3, based on the script.
They're different stories.
Like, that's like so brilliant, right? How they could like. Anyway, I love stuff like that. The writers are fantastic for this series.
So, what I was gonna say there was, like, the thing about the telephone. Like, I still don't really quite understand the thing with the telephone. Right? It's Ouroboros, and like that's kind of like a joke a little bit. Right. But like, why did she know to like call that location? Like, I feel like there's still something about that like we're missing.
Like, he knows that he needs to call a phone. He knows which phone. First of all, I guess there's tons of other phones, but it's weird that there's a phone there. Okay, like, who put the phone there? Why is there a phone next to an elevator? That makes no sense to me. But the fact that then it's OB on the phone after all that suspense was really funny, because he's just like, oh, hey, finally. Like, you know, there you are. And, but they have this conversation that's kind of really important, right? Because Miss Minutes has control of the system, and they need to find Victor Timely, but they can't do that because they're being slowed down by Miss Minutes sabotaging, you know, their pathways to find him. And OB says, well, I can reboot the system, but it'll take the entire safety system offline, including the dampeners for magic. And Loki and Sylvie at the same time, they're like, do it. Because they're like, are you kidding me? We can use magic if you turn off the damn system? Like, why haven't you just done it automatically? Like, to them, it's so obvious, because if they can use magic, like, this thing will be over very quickly, which is what happens. OB reboots the system. We have this like Miss Minutes shutdown that's really, really creepy and kind of cool. Like, it almost was like they were going through older versions in a way, it looked like. And I think we see like the earliest iteration of Miss Minutes at the very end before she like completely shuts off, right?
When she was just a chess AI.
When she was just which that was a really cool little thing. Also very creepy, because what her last words to Victor were, "You'll never be him." She's like got an obsession with He Who Remains. It is wild.
But then she fades, and it's He Who Remains, right? Like right there.
Right. Then we see He Who Remains his face. Yeah. And then like Victor's staring right at him, and it's just like, what a weird like brain fog or whatever it's like for him.
I wanna go back to the telephone for a second.
Oh sure.
Yeah. So, and this is going to be a lot more relevant in the 5th episode, but I feel like either I looked this up earlier. The writer for the majority of this season is Eric Martin, right? So either Eric Martin or Benson and Moorhead, somebody is a big fan of Lost, someone is, right? And the telephone thing really makes me think of Lost in a lot of ways, right? And again, episode 5, I think this is way more clear. But the telephone call with Ouroboros, something about that, I don't know about you, Nick, it makes me think back to like my favorite Lost moment, where Desmond and Penny reconnect over the phone, and she's his constant, and like he can suddenly like be grounded in that point of time, right? Like I almost wonder if there's something similar going on there, right?
Man,
like it feels like it's important, right? It's supposed to be important, but it's a joke, right? Like something's going on there.
It's wild, right? Because there's a lot of like we're talking about Lost a lot during this fucking series.
We
for
are,
some reason.
yeah.
Man, we have to go look that up before we do our episode 6 episode because there's got to be something there.
We should.
So we'll look into that.
We're gonna go back. Let's watch The Constant. Even if there's nothing, it's the best episode of Lost.
Yeah, that's facts. There's gonna be a lot of people who might hear that and be like, hello?
Not Penny's boat.
Not Penny's boat.
Hello.
Yeah. That's such a sad. That's so sad too, though. Anyway, I don't want to talk about Charlie's stuff. Please don't make me.
Don't let me revisit it.
I'm
gonna bring up Lost again in the 5th episode for the record.
That's fine.
Let's keep going.
All right, so we're going. And so Miss Minutes shuts down. And so very quickly, Loki and Sylvie are able to get this done. Brad is sent out of the room to try to go and reboot the system. And very quickly, he gets possessed by Sylvie. And then, in turn, Sylvie, possessing Brad, has Brad, with this pruning device, walk back into the room with Victor Timely and Renslayer. And Brad's acting a little bit weird, but Renslayer doesn't know why. And, Brad moves Renslayer away from Victor Timely, says something. I forget exactly what he says to Renslayer, but the point is he prunes Renslayer. So Brad prunes Renslayer and sends her to the void, which is awesome. And I assume maybe this is for good, but not, probably not for good. I mean, who knows? We don't know, but sends her to the void without Miss Minutes, which makes it a little bit more possible that Renslayer might not be seen again during this series. We'll see. And so Loki and Sylvie come in, they get Victor Timely, and then they leave the room, and then Brad gets unpossessed, and he's just like, what the hell just happened? And that's the last we see of Brad for the moment. And so this is where this is the last 5 minutes of the episode now, right? This is everything's really, really heating up. They go back to they go to the room with OB and Casey and B-15, Sylvie, Loki, Victor to try to fix the loom. And we finally get the scene where Victor puts his head to get scanned and to give them full access so that they can actually try to fix the loom. And the computer, which I think is just a little funny thing, she's like, "Welcome, he who remains." when Victor gets his face scanned. And so we get this quick little scene about who's going to wear the suit. And Loki volunteers. He's like, I'll do it, or whatever. And right as Loki's about to walk down the stairs to put the suit on, Victor goes, "Wait, it should be me," and explains that something could go wrong, and he's the only one who knows how to fix it on site if something goes wrong on the bridge. This kind of makes a lot of sense quickly. And Loki, I think, realizing that it makes a lot of sense, but also selfishly not wanting to go out there anyway to begin with, kind of just doesn't argue with him. And OB is like, "We don't have any time anyway, so Victor, go downstairs," gives him a quick speech on what to do. And is there anything you want to say before we move on to this last part of episode 4?
No, I think
pretty good, right?
We're good. Yeah. We're pretty good here.
Okay, so Victor goes down, puts on the suit. He grabs the device to take out to the bridge. Obi opens the doors. He's like, "You got to run really fast. You got to haul ass or whatever."
No, he says, "You got to hoof it."
You got to hoof it. Victor takes a deep breath, takes one step outside of that door, and just gets absolutely shredded and turned into
He's
spaghetti.
atomized.
He's just
Totally atomized,
completely gone. Unbelievable. And at that moment, I'm just the look on my face is like complete shock, and the look on everyone else's face in the room is complete shock. And they're all just like, "What happened? What happened?" And nobody knows. And all Loki can say is he doesn't know. And then all of a sudden, we cut to the scene, and we're looking at the loom, and the loom is just imploding. It just starts to rip itself open and explode. And the last thing we get is a headshot of Loki, like face getting brighter as this explosion is coming closer and closer. And then cut to black. Episode ends. Complete shock. Just complete shock. And that's it. Like, we don't know. Like, in that moment, everything is gone and nothing exists anymore. And they're all dead. And I think one of the coolest things is that Marvel wiped the Instagram page of Loki.
Like, that was cool, yeah.
Deleted everything except for
good marketing move, Marvel.
Missed minutes. Really awesome, quick little marketing move. And so for a few days, it was just that. And then they released a trailer for the last 2 episodes. But that was really cool. But yeah, I don't really have anything to say about the ending that we haven't said already. Just complete.
I am going to say one thing about the ending.
Please go ahead.
Again, I'm going to bring up Lost in episode 5, but just something else just occurred to me right now as we're talking about it. This ending, because I was going to say, dude, how wild would it have been if this was the ending of season 2, right? But then as I was thinking it, I was like, wait, that's how Lost season 2 ended. When they don't they don't push the buttons, right?
Yeah.
And like they do the failsafe and then everything fades to white. It's literally how Lost season 2 ends, when everything's imploding, right?
Dude, this guy must have been a director for Lost. Like, how do we not know this yet? I feel like we shouldn't be talking about this.
Someone here loved Lost, because episode 5, there's a lot of Desmond similarities. Anyway, yeah, like you said, total shock and awe. Could not wait for episode 5 as a result of this. I mean, there's really nothing else I can say. It was just such a great ending, you know?
Yeah, it was awesome.
An amazing TV ending.
Yeah, incredible. And definitely like the most shocking ending since the Thanos snap in Marvel. Definitely and this is why this episode was probably the best TV episode they've done of all the shows so far. Just an incredible amount of detail and like shock and awe. It was so well done. And now, like, episode 5 is the most anticipated episode in a while for me of a TV series, purely based on how 4 ended, and it was excellent. I don't think it disappointed at all. How do you want to tackle episode 5? Do you want to read the summary, or should we just get into it?
Oh, let's just go right in. I'm gonna do a quick summary. Episode 5. We're rejoined with Loki at the TVA. Everything is spaghettifying. Loki's freaked, but as he's wandering around, suddenly he begins time slipping in and out of different places of the TVA, and he sees himself time slipping in and out of the TVA. Very interesting. But then Loki starts time slipping out of space. He starts space slipping, if you will. Time-space slipping. And he's drawn to different iterations of his friends, or maybe these are the variations back in their proper places from when they were picked out of time and placed in the TVA. It's unclear. As he's time slipping and he comes across Casey, Mobius, and B-15, eventually he time slips into OB, who is a failed science fiction writer, apparently. And has decided to help Loki because everything Loki says makes total sense to Obi, and like, bless his heart, like he's just so here to be helpful.
Yeah.
And he's pretty helpful. Masters time pad technology in about 18 months thanks to the handbook that Loki supplies him with. We come across Sylvie, who is still not quite on board with everything, but for some reason has retained her memories of the TVA, unlike the other variations. Eventually, we time slip back to where Ouroboros is, where we've gathered the Time Vengers, as I'm calling them, and Sylvie's on board and helping because her reality's just been spaghettified. But as they're getting ready to take charge, it's too late, and the reality therein spaghettifies. But then Loki time slips back into the same moment that they were just in moments before, and he realizes how to control his own time slipping, which is something Ouroboros had encouraged him to do. It's not about what, it's not about how, it's about who. Loki has made his full transition into Doctor Who, and
nice.
That is where we are left off as Loki decides, I can rewrite the story, and he takes himself back to the moments before the TVA is spaghettified.
Yeah, which is, we'll get to that, but that it seems like, why would you go to that moment right before? Because like, what else could possibly be done in that moment to change it? So that'll be really interesting. But I guess we'll go from the top, right? And we'll try to hit the more important points and maybe not go scene by scene. Although it's tough because like I feel like every scene is like super important. But as you said, the beginning of the episode is Loki's back in the TVA, and he's time slipping again. But this time he's by himself, and there's a failsafe mode that's been initiated. And there's a couple fun. There's like one or two fun little scenes where he like talks to himself, like he says hello to someone, and then he realizes later, oh, he was saying hello to himself. And this is a very important moment because he had picked up the TVA guidebook at the very beginning in the TVA, and that's super important for later. So the main part here is that he has a TVA guidebook on his person. He's got one with him. TVA turns into spaghetti. He time slips to a branch timeline in 1962 at Alcatraz, of all places, where Casey is a criminal in this timeline. And Casey's breaking himself.
I love that choice for him.
Yeah, it's so funny. He's breaking himself and two others out of jail. Yeah, so like this is like the quick flashback where he sees him, and during these scenes he's time slipping to a bunch of different branch timelines where all of these important people are. And the one point I want to make is there is one place that he time slips to that we don't see again. So all the places that he quickly time slips between, like he does it slowly and he does it quickly, right? Like, the Alcatraz where Casey is, the jet ski shop where Mobius is, the doctor's office where B-15 is. But there's one place he time slips that we don't see again, and it's this room with a red ball and a number 5. You remember this? You might have to go. If you don't remember this, you're gonna. And the only reason I wrote it down is because I watched this episode like back to back. I watched it twice back to back, and so the second time I was like, okay, I'm going to take a little bit more detailed notes. There is a room he time slips to really quickly. It just has like a red globe in the middle on a table and the number 5 in the background. And he doesn't go back there.
Yeah.
He doesn't go back there. It's the only place he time slips to that doesn't have a correlation to one of the people from the TVA.
Right. It's right. I did think that this was random, right?
We have no idea. But it can't be random. It can't be random.
Right. It was important. I don't know if the room holds more significance than this, but it was important because he drops that information to OB, and OB tells us, well, you can't time slip in and out of something that doesn't exist anymore, but you did, so therefore it's possible. And look, he's
right.
Like, that didn't make any sense. He's like, yes, It did. Would you like me to explain it again?
Yeah. So there is this room that we are like, I'm assuming it has some significance for episode 6, but right now we have no clue. But anyway, so he's going out of these different branch timelines, and so like B-15 is a doctor in 2012. Mobius lives in Cleveland in 2022.
Hang on. I thought that was going somewhere because that was a very interesting date and time, date and space that they chose. It was New York 2012.
Ah, yeah.
That's just before the Battle of New York.
Ah, but it's a branch timeline.
It is a branch timeline.
But I
wonder what the significance of that is.
But it is interesting if there's going to be something about that later. That's a very good point too. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Mobius is in a branch timeline in Cleveland in 2022, and so none of those are really very important. the most important person that he finds and is able to actually talk to is OB, because OB is the one who can actually get together. So I think it's probably good what we just kind of jump into there, and then we'll get to the others, right? So OB is in a branch timeline, 1994, Pasadena, California. And the first we see of him is he is picking a book up off the shelf in a bookstore. And he goes to the counter to buy it, and it doesn't scan. And he's like, "Oh, I can give you cash. It's okay." And the cashier is like, "No, like, it's weird that it doesn't scan." Like, for some reason, opens the book trying to like jog her memory. "Oh, I've never seen this book in here before. Like, what is this?" And the back fold is a picture of OB, and he's the author. And it turns out that OB is a science fiction writer that nobody cares about because nobody's reading science fiction then, or on that timeline. And he's basically put his own book on the shelf to try to get sales going. And the shop owner comes around the corner and is just like, "You again. Like, you got to stop putting your books on the shelf. No one wants to read these." It's so sad.
He's such a sweet boy.
He's such a sweet boy. And so he picks up all his books that he's like been like stuffing on the shelves there, trying to get people to buy. And he leaves. He's
trying to generate buzz.
Yeah, he's trying to generate buzz, and he leaves.
Yeah.
And we get this shot from above, from afar and above, of this like really cool warehouse in the middle of nowhere. And it turns out that this is like Obi's workshop, and Obi is actually a physicist that wants to be a science fiction writer, which is really funny.
Yeah, he's a successful physicist.
Yeah,
but a failed science fiction writer. And he's like, "God, I'm such a failure."
It's like,
that
incredible.
Is hilarious.
Yeah. And
I love how they bring that back later with the handbook. I assume we'll get to that though.
Yeah. And the cool part here is like Obi is the only person that Loki has like come to see that's that Obi doesn't think Loki's talking crazy. This is like the moment that this version of Obi has been waiting for his entire life. He's like, "What? Yeah. This is amazing. Like, this is science fiction, but it's actually happening."
It's like literally what I wrote. Yeah.
Yeah, this is my book.
One of my characters.
And Obi's mentioning this book thing, and Loki's like, "What is this?" He's like, "Oh, only my most popular book of all time." He's like joking that he's like the most popular fiction writer.
Speaking of books, I am wondering if this is something Marvel is intentionally doing now, for marketing reasons, where they introduce a book into like a movie or a TV show, and then they do it to then sell that item later in the real world. For example, like Scott Lang's biography. That's a book that's like out there now. Like you can buy that book.
That's cool.
So like when the TVA handbook got introduced, I was like, I wonder if they're gonna do that with the handbook. And now that OB's got like his own science fiction book, I'm like, I feel like they're setting that up to actually sell that.
I'm sure that there's definitely going to be a handbook. It would be really wild if they actually have a science fiction book. If they partner with a writer to actually write a science fiction book, I will buy that.
I'll buy that.
Mm-hmm. I won't probably buy the TVA handbook because like it's a cool thing, but I don't.
Right.
I'm not a collector on that sense, but like I would actually buy the science fiction book to read if they partnered with a writer for that. That'd be wild.
Especially if like Loki like mirrors like a character in Obi's book, right?
Yeah,
like,
that would be really
interesting
cool.
Insight.
Yeah. That would be really awesome if they did that. Anyway, so we get this awesome scene, right? Like where Loki explains the whole story to Obi. And Obi's asking him, all these questions, and he's trying to help him control his time slipping. Where we kind of get this like, like it reminds me of like any superhero story who like an origin story of a superhero who's trying to learn how to control his powers, right? It's like we kind of get that scene where Obi's trying to help him control his powers, and he's just like trying to time slip. It looks ridiculous, and he doesn't do it. And then we got Obi doing like experiments on Loki, like electric shocks him, tries to scare him. He's like, "Oh, no fight or flight." Oh, okay. And he's like writing down stuff, trying to figure out what triggers his time slipping. And this is when they're having like no luck getting Loki to control his time slipping. So Obi has another idea, and he suggests getting the band back together, which is everyone has a temporal aura. if you get everyone back together in the same room, I can read the temporal aura and we can get coordinates for where we have to go. Which is pretty, it seems like on paper, seems like a really good suggestion to figure out like what the next move is. And it's a good plan because they don't have any other plan really right now. But after Obi suggests this, Loki asks Obi if he can build a tempad. And this is a really cool scene because this is where the importance of Loki having the guidebook from earlier in the episode comes in. Obi doesn't know how to build a tempad. And Loki remembers that he has a TVA handbook. And the TVA handbook is written by Obi. And so the variant of Obi is like shocked by this. And because Loki's like, yeah, everyone has one of these. Like everyone has a guidebook. And and we get this sweet little line where Obi's just like, so I am gonna write a bestseller. Because it's like the most popular book in that version, right? But this is cool because now Obi has a guidebook for how to build a tempad. He has the directions that a variant of himself had written, which is a whole nother Ouroboros, like in itself, which is just like mind bending.
Yeah, now we got at least 2 of them going.
Yeah, so now we've got at least two going, and the next thing that happens is Loki time slips. And so Loki hands the guidebook to Obi, and it's like right after that happens, like Loki time slips, and he time slips to Mobius's house. Which is like, we get a quick little scene where we realize like Mobius has 2 kids and 2 boys who seem to be a pain in the ass, right? He's got 2 young kids. We find out that, his wife is gone. Like, presumably she passed away unexpectedly is what what we're led to believe, I think, is the way that we're supposed to read into that. So he's a single father of 2, exhausted. And Loki shows up at his house, and Mobius recognizes him from the shop earlier when Loki had arrived, but was only there for a second before uncontrollably time slipping again. And at first, Mobius is like, oh, okay, it's weird that you're here, but I'm going to try to sell you a jet ski because I'm a single father of 2 and I don't need 2 jet skis and I really need the money, basically, is the vibe that I got from that. And
they were Sea-Doos, by the way.
Sea-Doos, sorry.
Hey, it matters to Mobius.
It does. You're correct.
Combination of form and function.
Yeah, which was really funny that Loki says that to him. And they have a conversation, and this is the weird part here is Loki's like, how am I going to explain to this guy that his life isn't real and that he needs to come with me and that we need to save the world? It's totally it's an impossible task that Loki is trying to do right now. It's explain the unexplainable to a regular guy from Cleveland, Ohio.
Right, and
not possible.
Truthfully, even he doesn't totally understand it, right? And,
right.
He has to try and sell that which he doesn't understand. But he makes the brilliant play of hey, look, I know you're gonna miss out on your kids, but we can bring you back to the same spot. Mobius
Right.
counters with yeah, I would know that I was missing though, and Loki's yeah, but if you don't do this,
no,
none of y'all are gonna exist.
But before that conversation, Loki's trying to convince him without any proof that what he's saying is real. Mm-hmm. And this is the moment where OB shows up with a portal. He shows up with a portal. Yeah, OB shows up with a portal. He walks out of the portal with a big tempad, right? A 1994 version tempad because the technology isn't good enough.
This is this is a Palm Pilot, but
it's a Palm. Huge. It's a huge tempad. It's a computer-sized tempad because the technology isn't there for the smaller version that we're used to. And this is funny because he shows up. He's to Loki, it was only he thinks it was really fast because in Loki's head, he just saw OB an hour ago. And OB goes, what do you mean quick? He's this took me 19 months. I lost my job and my wife left me. So it's been it's been 18 or 19 months in Obi's world since Loki had left him this guidebook to build this tempad. And to Loki, it's only been like an hour. So we get this really cool like time juxtaposition here. It's like, but this is very good that this is when Obi shows up, because it helps Mobius understand a little bit about taking a leap of faith and like believing what Loki is saying, because he just saw a man teleport into his garage, and then they teleported them to like the other side of the street where they're looking at Mobius's house. And this is where the conversation you mentioned comes up, where they're trying to convince Mobius, and he's like, no, you don't understand. We can bring you right back to this moment in time and there won't be a problem. And so the speech works and they convince Mobius to go with him. And basically the next couple scenes are, you know, Loki recruiting the rest of the band, right? So B-15, the Time Vengers, B-15, Casey. But the most important one, they get back to the room, they get back to the warehouse, and we're still missing Sylvie. And this is like, when it's like, oh, is that everyone? He's like, no, there's one more. And this is like, this was a cool scene, and it makes sense. But basically, Loki takes Tempad and goes to Sylvie's branch, which is what we're used to. She's back at the McDonald's. She's just getting off work, and she puts her food on the back of the truck. And we see that the food turns into spaghetti and evaporates, just like the TVA did at the beginning of the episode. And
so, it's a little preview about what's about to happen.
Immediately, we're like, okay, there is a problem still here with time. And Loki shows up, and he's expecting to have to do this whole crazy speech. But Sylvie has full memory of what happened and knows who he is. And like, Loki's...
I want to talk about that.
Yeah. Loki's shocked that she knows who he is because no one else does. But to me, I wasn't shocked because she's a Loki. Like, to me, the reason that she remembers everything is because she is also a Loki. And there is a special
I think
aspect there. But what is your...
Yeah, I have two thoughts on that. Well, like, it could go one of two ways. Because, like, yeah, they've created a distinction there, right?
Right.
And I think it's either A... I don't feel as good about this one, but it is a possibility that we have to consider. I think it's either A, that because she is technically She Who Remains, right? Like, you know, she has, like, the Ultra Time Pad, you know, the one that He Who Remains had. Because she has that, like, there's something special about her now, right? Where, like, she can remember moments before, like, spaghettification happens, right?
Right.
Or... and this is what you were saying, there's something special about being like an Asgardian, or like specifically a god, right? Where I think that's going to come into play of like the difference of someone like Loki, one of the Lokis, walking outside to go take care of what needs to be done, right? I think that's what they're trying to tell us. I think you're closer to the point.
Yeah, but also, like, you brought up a point about her having the Tempad, which we didn't know until the end of the episode, right? Like, at that moment, we don't know.
We've known she's had it since episode 2.
Okay, so
she showed it at the McDonald's.
I think it's one of those things.
I don't think Loki knows, though.
I think it was easy to forget then. I think maybe
for sure,
right? Because I forgot she had that. But it also brings up another point, because she has that. Like, we don't know that she doesn't use that at the end of episode 4.
Yeah.
Before
I think it's actually
the lights
safe to
go
assume
out.
Maybe she did.
Right?
Yeah.
Because maybe she actually uses it when we're close up on Loki and everything's about to implode. It's possible that she uses it to go to that timeline, right?
Because save herself.
Based on how episode 5 starts, like, episode 5 starts essentially kind of where 4 ends. And instead of there being like an explosion, it's more like, obviously, like, the TVA goes into failsafe mode from 4. So it's not like it just like all evaporates immediately, right? It's more of a slow process. So it's very possible that she time hopped to where we find her in episode 5 instead of like the loom sending her there, right?
Blasted her there.
Blasting
I think
her
you're
there.
right. I think we have to assume
So,
she saved herself.
we might
That's
get
why she remembers.
Yeah, we might get I wonder if they'll clarify that. They might not. Maybe it's just a fun open to interpretation thing, but it's definitely, it's an important point. Loki's obviously had a day, and they go to the bar.
He's had a day.
Sylvie's like, let's go have a drink. So they go to a bar. And they have this conversation. One thing I wanted to ask you about is they showed a game, an arcade game in the bar, Zaniac. Does that mean anything to you?
Yeah. Christ. Isn't that what Brad stars in, like his movie?
Oh, maybe that's what it was.
I think it is.
Okay.
I did not catch that, but that's what's ringing the bell.
It's an arcade game called Zaniac.
I'm pretty sure that's the movie he stars in.
It's one of those things that they put in an episode and they zoomed in on it to where it was like a fun thing for them to include. So I was like, I wonder what that was. Yeah. And I think you're right about what it is. Anyway, so they have this heart-to-heart, and Sylvie gets through to Loki basically saying that Loki only wants to save everyone because he's scared of being alone. And Loki's like admitting that that's the reason, basically, right? And so he goes back to the warehouse where the rest of the band is, because Sylvie has decided to stay where she is because she wants to live there in peace and not worry about it. And Loki's like realizing he was being selfish, and he's trying to tell the band that, okay, never mind, like this isn't happening. And this is when we get like this. We go back to Sylvie and we get like probably the coolest scene of the episode, right? Sylvie walks into a record shop and she just wants to relax at the end of this long ass day and look for a record, put a record on. And she gets handed a record from the shop owner, and it's a record by Velvet Underground called Loaded. And she puts the record on, and this is like a really cool, one of my favorite scenes in shows and movies and stuff is when like they put records on. And you notice that the record is on side 2. And I'm always like, oh, I wonder if they dropped the needle in the right place. And she drops the needle like at the beginning of side 2, which is a song, I believe it's supposed to be called Hands Held High, or I might be a little bit wrong. I don't think that's the correct title. But anyway, it's not the song that plays. The song that plays is Oh Sweet Nuttin', which is also on that side of the record, but it's the last song on that record. So the needle isn't dropped in the correct spot, which, like, if you're a music buff or like whatever, that's a cool little detail, right? Like that they don't actually, the song that plays is not actually where the needle is dropped on that side too.
This man's playing Galaga. He thought we wouldn't notice.
Yeah.
But we did.
But so it's a fun little blurb for the music buffs and the music people out there like me. But that song that does play, Oh Sweet Nothing,
that's a great detail.
Is a really fantastic song, and it's perfect for the scene, right? So like Sylvie is just like unwinding after this long ass day, and behind her, we see her world, her timeline start to disintegrate and turn into spaghetti, and the shop owner tries to like yells her name, and she turns around and she sees this happen, and it's just like everything goes black because this world is now. This timeline is now gone. And this is when the TemPad comes back in and we realize, oh yeah, that's right. She has this like all world TemPad. She can go wherever she wants. And she goes to Loki in the warehouse after he's got done saying that, everyone, it's fine. You go back to your lives and whatever. And she shows up and she's like, no, it's not going to be okay. We have a huge problem. And I'm trying to get to my notes now. So the thing about the TemPad that bothered me, that she has this all-world TemPad, like, she didn't even bother to go look for everyone else. She
wants nothing to do with them, right?
The fact that she was like, she had all of her memories, like Loki, and she just like wanted to live her life on her timeline. She didn't give a shit about anyone else. She didn't care to look at all. She was totally happy with just. Yeah. I was like, talk about selfish. That was like, I was like mad. I was like, this is ridiculous. So, but she goes. So she gets back to the warehouse, and this is like, OB is like, so it was a fiction problem, because she's coming back. She's coming back, and
he's
she's
so
like,
chipper about everything.
Yeah, it was like, actually, like, everything's going to hell. Like, we do need to do something about this. And OB's like, it was a fiction problem. So anyway, and then at this moment, like, the real quick blurb about this is when they all realize that they're turning into spaghetti, like Casey turns into spaghetti and like disintegrates, and then B-15 starts to. Mobius has a reaction that I think is really important. And that version of Mobius just wanted to go back to his boys. And the reason this is important is because the Mobius that we know back at the TVA doesn't want to know what his life was on the timeline before. He's happy with where he is and with doing important work at the TVA. And so it was really cool to see that version of Mobius
I'm glad you brought this up. Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought this up because there's a very specific question that I don't remember if it's Sylvia or Loki asks him this. I want to say it's Loki. When he asks him about like, aren't you curious?
Yeah, it's Loki.
And one of the questions is, aren't you curious about who you left behind?
Right.
And like that's going to be like the anchor to this character, right?
Yeah.
Not to make like a C pun there, but yeah. that's ultimately going to come back.
Yeah, and so I thought that was a really cool thing that they showed about like how this version of Mobius is reacting, right? And so that's definitely an important thing to remember for later, probably. But anyway, so everyone's disintegrating now. And they're basically like, the last two people left are Loki and Sylvie. And then Sylvie starts to also disintegrate because time has finally caught up. And she says there's nowhere left to go because she must have checked before she went to see them with her tempad. She's like, there's nowhere else. This is the last moment, basically, in time. And when Loki sees Sylvie disappear, he ends up being able to control his time slipping. And he time slips right back to the moment right before when Sylvie came to the group in the warehouse and said, no, like, there's a problem. And this is like, in that moment, Loki's like, he turns to OB and he says, I can control it, and realizes that there's not a why or how, it's about who. And I can imagine it's about Sylvie, right? Like losing the connection they have that we saw in the first season with the portal opening to save them from this world that they weren't able to get out of. They have a connection that is really important. And this is the thing that helps him control his time slipping, is losing Sylvie, basically. At least that's what I got from it.
Yeah.
And
no, that was absolutely it. That's his constant.
That's his constant is that. And so he can control it, and he time slips right back to the end of episode 4, where he's standing on top of the stairs at the TVA watching Victor Timely walk down. And he says, I can rewrite history.
Or no, I can rewrite the story.
I can rewrite the story. Sorry. I can rewrite the story.
That's very important. That's a callback to He Who Remains.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
it's fascinating, right? Because there were moments in this episode when they were collecting everyone, where he was getting the band back together, and I was like, wait, am I right? Is he gonna restart the TVA? Because I remember after episode 3, I was like, what if Loki's the one who actually like is the one who created the TVA? And I don't think that's actually the case now after watching this episode, but there was moments where it was very interesting. But then at the end where he's like, I can rewrite the story, it's like, well, maybe technically I don't know. There are so many Ouroboros situations right now in this show. It's quite fascinating.
It is.
But that's the end of the episode.
For the record, just real quick on that, the reason why I kept talking about Lost was like this episode in particular reminded me so much of Lost's The Constant, right? Where Desmond's mind is time slipping everywhere. It's the same exact concept. Someone's definitely a fan of Lost. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I think you're right. You got to be
and
right
then, of course, the thing that like anchors him back is a person.
Yeah.
Who, right? Very interesting.
The last thing that I want to talk about is a point that you made that I want you to make on the call. You need to talk about the similarities between each episode of both seasons.
Yeah,
and I think it still stands for 5.
I think so too. I think you can make an argument.
So I want you to make those points real quick because they're super important before we end the episode.
So what Nick is talking about is we were on the phone one day. We don't talk about anything else except this. This is what we live for.
This is what we live for.
Yeah, it's glorious purpose.
Glorious purpose.
And I was telling Nick I had this thought that I realized there's a lot of weird parallels between the first season and the second season if you go episode by episode. And what I mean by that is if you take a look, there are certain beats that are the same. So, like, for example, like in episode 1 of both seasons, we start with a Loki who is on the run from the TVA. Episode 1 starts this way as he becomes unstuck in time. Episode 2 starts this way as, again, he's unstuck in time, and he's being chased, right?
Season 2, episode 1 starts the same way, is what you mean.
Sorry, season 2, episode 1, he's unstuck in time, time slipping back and forth, right? TVA's chasing. Episode 2 of both episodes, we have Loki now working with the TVA. Both seasons, and we are looking for the variant, Sylvie, in both seasons. Episode 3, I think this one's a little weaker for this argument, but I think you still make it work. We have Loki and Sylvie, who are opposed to each other in both of these episodes, but by the end of both episodes, they are now on the same page. They are now working together, right? Episode 4 is where I felt really confident about this theory. Episode 4 ends with both Lokis, both season 1 Loki and season 2 Loki, basically getting wiped from existence, or at least the way we knew existence, right? Episode 1 ends with him being pruned by Ravonna.
Season 1, episode 4.
Season 1, episode 4. Thank you for fact-checking me on that. Ends with Ravonna pruning him. Season 2 ends with, of course, the loom exploding and him being wiped out. Right. So you follow these
fascinating.
Beats. Yeah. We're hitting the same beats. It's almost like, time repeats itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And of course, episode 5. Episode 5, we're in the void.
Yep.
Episode 5 of season 2, we're not in the void, but we're also kind of like in this weird time limbo.
Right.
Where Loki's dealing with being pruned out of existence and now trying to get back to what was, right?
Right. Yeah, the parallels for each episode are like so on point, and it's such a great call by you to notice those two, the parallels for each episode. Thanks, it's like really fascinating. Like it's totally awesome. So yeah, that's totally great points. But again, that's the last thing I wanted to talk about. Something for everyone to think about. What's your projection for 6 based on that parallel? What's 6 going to be like, right? Because episode 6, we meet He Who Remains in season 1.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wonder what's going to happen here in the last episode of season 2. How is that parallel?
This is a good question. Okay, so no matter what happens, we know Jonathan Majors is going to be in this last episode because we know he's signed for 3 episodes. So right away, I think that means we're definitely going to see Victor Timely again. But for the parallel, I think we're definitely going back to the end of time. And I think it's definitely going to end with somebody is on the throne at the end of time. Right? There will be a new He Who Remains. And I'm kind of getting the vibe it's either Sylvie or Loki. I mean, maybe it's Ravonna. It would make sense if it's Ravonna. But yeah, that's what I'm going with. There is a new They Who Remains at the end of all of this.
It would be so wild if it ends up being Sylvie. Because the whole reason that we're having this problem in season 2 is because Sylvie was impatient and killed He Who Remains and didn't listen to Loki.
It's true, yeah.
I think that Loki would be the most likely. No, but I think he's too important of a character to then just have like chilling at the end of time, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So it's going to be interesting. It's fascinating. So I have no idea. Your prediction is better than I could have come up with. Like, so it'll be interesting to see what happens next. Yeah. That's it. We'll see you guys in a week with the updates on 6.
But until then, may the review be with you.
Peace.